Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And in this one, I'm going to try to be a little bit louder because that's the criticism often in these videos is that I'm not loud enough. So much like the Affliction Warlocks that wanted to be buffed and they're trying to be as loud as they can, I will as well. This is going to be the Affliction Warlock Shadowlands review. I've had a couple days to get this puppy going for myself and trying out a couple of builds and then theory crafting some other builds. This is going to be mostly from a PvP perspective, as that's kind of what the channel is focused on or where most of my expertise comes from. I will take into consideration PvE when I come across something that becomes apparent to me that it would also be strong in PvE, but at the moment the main focus is going to be for PvP. So baseline, what you've got coming back to the class a little bit is going to be these curses, and Curse of Weakness was surprisingly good. The main reason was that it lasts for 2 minutes. So you don't really need to worry about managing so many global cooldowns as I was worried for the specialization, having so many instant cast debuffs to apply. So with it lasting 2 minutes, you still need to make sure it's up because it's very powerful. But it's not as much of a chore as I anticipated. Curse of Tongues only lasts 30 seconds, but that is still much longer than the PvP Honor Talent version of it. So, and with mages having a cooldown on their decurse, all of the classes that can decurse having a cooldown, you can get pretty good uptime with this, and it's very powerful at the moment. Curse of Recklessness was one that I was somewhat avoiding using. If you're playing with a class that does physical damage, like a warrior, it's potential that you could get some value, like applying this to a mage, but I still feel like it doesn't get as much value as reducing cast time or reducing movement speed. Especially when you can amplify these curses with honor talents and conduits. To me, Curse of Recklessness is just kind of like a meme. And more or less, it also makes the target immune to fear. So there's too much drawback, and it's kind of too much of a meme. Perhaps usage here would be in Torghast, or even maybe in just questing and maybe some dungeons. If what it means by refuse to leave combat. So in some dungeons, I'm trying to remember the prison one from last expansion, Battle for Azeroth, when you got all the prisoners low health, they start scattering and running around in circles. So this might prevent them from doing that, so they won't aggro other monsters. And similarly in Torghast, if there's mobs when they get low health and they start running away from you and aggroing things, it might prevent them. So there could be use for it in that environment. Also, it's 5% physical damage, so if you're playing with rogues and stuff in PvE and you're just buffing their damage by 5%, that's very similar to kind of like the Chaos Brand from Demon Hunters or the Mark of the Crane from Monks. So there could be use for it in PvE, but in PvP, to me, it seems more like a meme. But I'm very happy to see all these back, and I had a lot of fun just trying to remember to press them. And then when I did, I was like, oh my god, I have a slow. This is insane. I can just run circles. Now, there are the Covenant abilities are a little bit more difficult, more so like the on use Warlock abilities seem pretty difficult for me to like get a grasp of like what's going to be the best in PvP, because most of them are nukes. So with the Necro Lord, you get Decimating Bolt, which is functions similar to like a Chaos Bolt. It doesn't hit as hard, obviously, and it'll buff the next 3 Shadow Bolts by 300 or by 200%. The upside of running a Decimating Bolt would be as if you want to build around Shadow Bolt, so you could run Nightfall, and then you could be trying to fish for these instant cast Shadow Bolt procs. This was the build that I was going to try next. I was trying to Drain Life build in most of my testing so far, but this was going to be my next step, was building a Shadow Bolt build with Decimating Bolt and just maintaining dots and looking for this, and also looking for Death Bolts as my little kind of burst windows. If you run a Shadow Bolt build, I could see this getting use, but you would need to be running the Nightfall. Otherwise, getting Shadow Bolts is really difficult in PvP. Now in PvE, obviously, that's a completely different story. You're likely to be using this all of the time, and I'm sure that it is going to be amplifying your rotation. But in PvP, most of the Covenant Bolt abilities are pretty tough to utilize, and it's also because they're on the same school of magic as your damage, and that's all of them except the Kyrian. So if you wanted to me as a PvP player, the way that I'm picking the Covenants is Venthyr for interrupt reduction, Necrolords for some temporary crowd control immunity, and then Kyrian for stun, polymorph trap reduction, and then Night Fae for some aggression, some slows, and some mobility. And that's how like I'm thinking of the covenants in general for almost all classes. And then if the ability is also strong, then that's nice. And Decimating Bolt to me benefited the most. Venthyr to apply the AoE curses when you launch out that big bolt could also be good if you pair it up with this Amplify Curse, if it synergizes. I should have tested the synergy. I didn't make a Venthyr Warlock yet, but if you can go Amplify Curse and then cast the Covenant ability, which just basically applies these curses to everyone around the target, it could be really good. Then you just get this giant 70% slow or a 60% cast speed reduction if two casters are stacked up. You could get some nice combos, but I feel like this won't have synergy with the Covenant ability because it says strictly the Curse of Exhaustion spell and not the Covenant spell itself, which is just a little bit unfortunate. But Decimating Bolt was still some fun in PvP. It's just challenging because it's on the same school of magic as your damage, and if you get interrupted, you're kind of just sitting there with your hands up in the air because you can't really do too much when you're interrupted. You're going to notice that your pet cast is really, 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 really long. You can use Fel Domination to make it a little bit faster. I say a little bit faster. Basically instant cast, but it's a 3-minute cooldown. So strategies to kill pets are definitely going to come back, and that could be a bit of an annoyance to warlocks. Certainly not as much as hunters, as they don't get Fel Domination at all, but that's something to consider. Maintaining your pet's health with Health Funnel is going to be a lot more important then for Shadowlands. If you liked your pet management and that, then it's going to be great. If you didn't manage your pet too well and it ends up dying, then it's going to be tough luck for you. And in a way, I like that pet management is going to be more impactful, but it can be abusive at some points. I do remember older expansions like tunneling down warlock pets and then training them on interrupting them. So with it being such a long cast, that definitely could be a problem, and that's a shared problem with hunters. One of the new spells coming to Affliction is Malefic Rapture. I wasn't utilizing it too much in my PvP testing. Now, obviously for AoE and PvE, yeah, you're going to be spamming it. And situationally, when there's more 3v3 action and more players get invited to the beta, then I'll get more trial and error. But when you're attacking one person, it just didn't make sense to be pressing it. You still maintain Dark Glare, so you'll still have that ability to increase the duration of all your dots. And now Deathbolt comes into an Honor talent, and it does do big damage. I got some really big death bolts. Just had to make sure that your agony was stacked up, corruption, unstable affliction on the target, and then go for a big death bolt. I was thinking about comboing it with Haunt. At the moment, as a Necrolord, I was running Grimoire of Sacrifice, and when you sacrifice the Voidwalker, you can use his ability to give yourself 30% more health. And then the Fleshcraft Shield, which is the Covenant ability, is a shield based on your max health. So I could make the shield bigger using this, and then be immune to crowd control longer with my Covenant talent tree that I was running. So that was my main strategy when I'm fighting 2 DPS players, as I was in most of my skirmishes and there weren't healers. Focusing on just getting more absorbs and more defense worked out for me a lot better. That isn't what I'm necessarily thinking will work in like competitive ranked PvP, but if you're a solo player and you really want to annoy rogues and stuff like that, then I thought this was kind of a cute way to do it. And like I said, I was playing the Inevitable Demise build, and I was playing a Drain Life build. So there's a Drain Life legendary, and it basically makes it so Drain Life does damage and restores health 50% faster. And Inevitable Demise is basically the Battle for Azeroth Azerite trait, and so you just wait, it stacks up, then you go for a big Drain Life. You could combo this. I was thinking about trying with Night Fae and running their Soul Rot, which turns your Drain Life into an AoE. So it drains faster. You wait for it to stack, and then you try and clump the other team up, and you just go whoosh, slurp, slurp, slurp. You know, like a big Slurpee, like a big gulp from 7-Eleven or something. What do they call it? Do they call them Slurpees where you live? I call them Slurpees where I live. I feel like they're slushies maybe somewhere else. Let me know in the comments below what you call them. But yeah, I was thinking about making a Slurpee Warlock and running the Night Fae as an option. But at the moment I wasn't. I was still trying this. It seems like it would be good in 3s where you get time to stack it up, but in the double DPS 2s it was falling a little bit short sometimes. I wasn't able to completely get the build going and online. What I'm really hoping is that this honor talent, which is NYI, which I don't know what it means, but I think it means it doesn't work at the moment, to where you can apply Unstable Affliction on multiple targets. I really hope this ends up going through so that we can kind of get that old school Affliction Rot playstyle that's been missing from the identity of the spec for quite a long time. You also gain more of a benefit and penalize healers for consistently dispelling it by granting yourself a lot of haste, which then helps you maintain all of your dots, which is a really big problem, especially at the start of a new expansion when haste levels are low. So I do hope that this talent ends up going through. And my main concern for Affliction in general is that it's not going to have that niche of being rot damage. I really hope that dot damage and like the warrior warlocks, the rogue warlock compositions, that whole archetype of the game that's missing right now in Battle for Azeroth makes a return. I think it provides for more interesting gameplay when you've got these high pressure rot teams that are looking to whittle down 3 teams and stay alive while doing it. That's my most enjoyable gameplay, at least. So if the tuning phase goes through and that's the case, then this new version of Affliction I think will be a lot of fun. There were a couple of other cheeky legendaries that I tried out, this one in particular, the neck piece. Your demonic gateway is instant cast and you can use it twice basically, but it's only twice once. You could run the honor talent to make your gateway a longer cast. You don't benefit from it being reduced, but you can make it longer range. And I was actually able to kite demon hunters with this. So I use gateway across the universe. They try to charge me. I gate all the way back. They get back to me, and then I port, and they're just rotting down to dots. So it seemed pretty funny in that sense. I don't know if it's one that you'll really want to go for first, if it's safer to just go for one that's based on damage output. But this was a lot of fun, and I thought it was funny. So I was using it a little bit to try and piss off a lot of melee DPS, because that's the name of the game here when you're playing a caster, right? But that's it for the gear and the builds, in my personal experience of it. Port coming back baseline is great. I love having this baseline. It means you also get Mortal Coil for extra crowd control on top of Shadow Fury, so bolstering up a lot of the offense of Warlock. When we look at the conduits, and someone pointed out in my Shadow Priest review, is that these are going to rank up. So I don't know if this is the lowest possible rank or the highest possible rank, because it doesn't say. But for example here, damage required to break your fear effects is increased by 100%. So if this is going to go up in power, 150%, 200%, how much? Or is this the max? Because if it goes up from this, that's insane in PvP, right? Because you're just going to be stunning people while they're feared, fully dotted, and nuking them down with death bolts. So this sets you up to be really strong. Maybe too strong, but it does set you up to be really strong either way as a finesse conduit. For myself, running the Strain Life build, and potentially if you wanted to go for the Soul Rot, that I was talking about from Night Fae, you could run an endurance conduit, and then your drain life is going to just heal you for more. So it'd be like a massive recovery moment for you to get back into the game. If you're really having a hard time with your pet, you could run a finesse conduit to get your fel domination a little bit faster to get your pet back into the fight. You can run for increased movement speed, and my critique of the conduits for priest was that 20% movement speed wasn't a lot, but if this scales up, who knows what this gets up to. If it scales from 30%, you might just be sprinting around super fast warlock. So these conduits are going to be pretty interesting in that regard. You can get cooldown reduction, although it's very minimal, but it might desync your dark glare with other cooldowns like Ascendance on Shaman. So it's always nice to desync your cooldowns. This was kind of just the baseline. You just get agony lasting longer. And then again, Malefic Rapture, I'm not sure in PvP. Now in PvE, this seems like, yeah, you go for that, especially for multi-target, and if that's going to be the main focus of the Affliction Warlock. The effectiveness of Shadow's Embrace is also a solid potency option, just to get more damage out, and that's pretty much for the Affliction. If we move over to look at the specific Azerite, Shadow Ball has a 20% chance of not consuming a charge. In PvE, this seems like it would be really good because you don't have to deal with being interrupted. You're not really harassed too much, but in PvP, you do have to worry about being harassed and interrupted and annoyed a lot. And unless you're running the Nightfall build, this could be very difficult to pull off. So I'm not sure if it's one that I would recommend at the moment for Affliction. It seems easier to just be going for Shadow's Embrace and then extra agony durations as just safer picks in terms of their conduits. But A lot of these conduits will increase your durability, give you a lot more mobility and a bit of choice there. So I personally had a lot of fun, even though at the moment on the beta there's no PvP trinkets, and I just learned that you can make an heirloom version of it, which is really odd. I'm hoping they add a max rank PvP trinket to the PvP vendor soon, so that can be used instead. So in a lot of games I'm just fighting a rogue and I'm dead in a kidney shot because I can't trinket. So that's the main problem at the moment I'm experiencing. But from the games that I'm getting where that isn't happening, I'm having a lot of fun utilizing a lot of the returned spells, in particular the curses. It's noticeable putting an exhaustion on somebody from not having exhaustion, or putting on weakness or tongues. There's just a lot great additions to it. So the only thing I think that could shoot it in the foot would be tuning. If dot damage in PvP is irrelevant, then you might be relying on Inevitable Demise, Deathbolt, cheesy one-shot builds, which in my mind is you're treading into Destruction Warlock territory, but you're not a Destruction Warlock and you don't get a lot of their benefits. So I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm hoping when we get to the tuning phase that their dots are going to feel impactful, and managing all your global cooldowns is going to feel rewarding. The only other addition that I would have liked to have seen to Warlock, which I'm sure at this point won't happen, but Fell Armor and Demon Armor being baseline and picking between the two. In my mind, stance dancing is one of the most fun parts of the game. This is shapeshifting for druids, or auras for paladins, or aspects for hunters. So picking between, can I get away with going into Fell Armor for some extra damage here, or will I regret it? Do I need the defense of Demon Armor? That decision making to me was a lot of fun gameplay. So it's just one little thing that I would have liked to have seen return to Warlock in general. But outside of that, I think that it has the highest potential to be a really fun and awesome spec, so long as the tuning phase goes through well for it. So I hope you enjoyed this video on Affliction Warlock. Let me know if you're going to be picking it up here, moving into Shadowlands. Please subscribe to the channel. It helps me greatly in my pursuit of creating this as a resource for players to pick their gameplay for Shadowlands, because we got a lot of decisions. It's pretty complicated. There's a lot of new stuff, and a lot of the decisions you're going to have a tough time going back on. So that's my main goal here, is to just be creative, come up with new builds, and share my personal experience with it, so that when you have to make the choice, you don't end up regretting it. Thank you very much, and we will see you in the next one.